Welcome to the Spotlight on Marketing, brought to us by Armstrong Lloyd. I'm your host, Karen Lloyd, and today we are joined by John Watton. John is an international marketing leader who shapes strategies at tech giants including Adobe, Yext, and VMware. He has a proven track record in building world-class marketing strategies in very complex global markets. But currently, he's moved to more of a fractional CMO role, where he's been investing his expertise in helping scale up ventures, focusing on some really interesting products within sustainability, social impact, and wellness. So welcome, John.
Hi, Karen. It's good to be here.
No, thank you so much. Now, I'm super impressed to hear that you're actually raising some money for Macmillan Cancer Support with a 20-mile hike in Northern Ireland at the Giant Causeway Mighty. I just wondered what's inspired you to do this challenge.
Yeah, well, I guess like a lot of people, given that 1 in 2 of us will get cancer in our lifetime, I've been affected somewhat by relatives having cancer. Sadly, my mum passed away coming up for 5 years ago, and my father's been going through prostate cancer treatment as well. So I've always kind of now prioritized cancer charities, and there's 2 other angles to it, which are, I guess, slightly less important. One is my wife's family are from the north of Ireland, so it's local to them, so it's a nice little connection there. And then secondly, I actually broke my ankle this year. So whilst a hike might not be a challenge for a lot of people, for me, I'm sort of getting back on my feet, and it's technically, I don't want to pick over the miles. I think it's going to be 26 miles. So it's going to be a marathon. It's going to be a marathon of walking. And yes. I don't think I've walked 26 miles for ever, maybe. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So it's a good cause, and a lot of connections for me personally.
No, great. I had a look at the terrain and it looks really exciting and beautiful, but a great cause. I will also put in the show note your fundraising link for people who want to donate.
Thank you. That's very kind. Thank you.
No worries. So moving on then back to business side of things, as I mentioned at the beginning, you've worked, I said to you, almost with some tech royalty, really, some big giants like Adobe and VMware. And from an outsider, I always think, oh, that's easy, because they're big brands and they're well-established companies. But I suspect there must be some challenges, but maybe different challenges to perhaps the scale-up companies. And just wondered what sort of challenges you did face.
Yeah, I mean, there's similarities and there's differences. I guess I've been fortunate to work for some of the most successful tech companies in the last 20 years. So add to that list Microsoft and SAP and Oracle as well. But I've also been the CMO of a startup, and as you say, right now I'm working on scale ups, and there are some common challenges. Obviously the scale and the kind of nature of them are different in small and big, but I've seen it on both sides. Wherever I've been, it's always, first of all, understanding what the role of marketing is, whether you're in an Adobe or a VMware, or you're in these seed stage ventures I've been working in. Really, what is it we want marketing to do, and then how do we measure the impact of that and understand whether we're having an impact and whether we've been successful. But in the bigger companies, that is further complicated by often being in a big structure. Sometimes you are being passed down the kind of strategic objectives. I worked in regional operations for some of those companies you mentioned, and very often you're taking the US global kind of view and trying to make that work in EMEA. At VMware, I marketed to 42 countries. So a very complex organization, multi-thousand person organization in Europe, let alone globally, which was nearly 30,000. So, what I love is that some of the sort of operational principles are fundamental. So getting it right at planning, making sure that everyone is aligned, in a bigger company like Adobe or VMware, you probably spend a little bit more time on that in terms of getting all your stakeholders together. It's easier in a small company to get people around a table and get maybe rapid agreement. Often, that sounds it's not easy either. And then, I think if I were to say one thing that kind of underlines everything from planning to execution to kind of review, it's always communication. So communicating, and the role of a marketing leader in those sorts of bigger businesses is often about thinking about that communication and stakeholder management proportionally more of your time than often the sort of doing of the marketing, because you clearly have a team to do that and you have more wider resources. So that's often it, and what marketing is expected to do can change within the lifespan of being at one of those big companies. Sometimes it's about new logo acquisition. Sometimes it's about customer retention. Sometimes it's about strengthening relationships. Sometimes it's about expanding the portfolio. Sometimes it's about changing the brand perception. It's funny. I saw a note on Adobe today, actually, and you and I probably know as Adobe is a very complex business we could probably name a lot of their products, but the sort of headline, which is a LinkedIn report to describe Adobe as the acrobat maker. The acrobat maker. So, companies like Adobe still have a brand challenge with a lot of their stakeholders out there to say, we do a little bit more than acrobat, actually. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think when you were at Adobe, you had quite a bit of a challenge, didn't you? Because your budgets were flat, but the company was still growing. And I think many companies are in that same situation now, really. So we'd love to hear how, with a flat budget, you managed to still achieve growth.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's a couple of things. I know it's some of the topics you want to talk about as well. So it's really about harnessing probably more and more technology to help you scale up your marketing operations. And just a position when I came into Adobe, it was 2013, which was just at the period when they were moving, if people can recall that far back, moving from sort of box software. So you used to be able to buy Acrobat and Creative Tools, Photoshop and so on in design and et cetera, in boxes. And you would pay quite a lot of money, 500, 600, 700 pounds for your box of Adobe software, and then it's yours and you install it and et cetera, et cetera. Of course, today that sort of model is very outdated and we're all familiar with subscriptions, but at the time Adobe was moving to a subscription model where you paid a monthly, subscription, and there was huge uproar at the time, but it was a big period of change for the company. A lot of customers are very resistant. And so the company is going through a business transformation and marketing need to transform as well. So what we used to do wasn't appropriate for how the company wanted to be and for the future. So it was all about innovating our marketing to be more appropriate for the business. So, for example, in the sort of B2B world, we were very events heavy. Most of our budget was spent on events as the way in which we went out and connected and, built relationships. So, part of my role was to make that shift. And, we had a mantra of making sure that 70% of our spend was on digital. And so, that was one of the things which we could drive enormous efficiencies just by changing our marketing mix. And to do that, we need to be more data driven. So getting the team to think about the data, understand the impact that each channel had, understand what was working, what wasn't working, understand the mix and where to invest our dollars or euros or pounds was really key to it as well. So, there's a lot you can do by just shifting, transforming, innovating your marketing to be totally different and really using data to drive that. So, I don't think I've actually been anywhere, if I think about it, it's kind of a sad indictment where our problems have been solved by more people and money. I've always been in places where you really have ample resources. It's just what you do with those resources, whether it's people, whether it's budget, or whether it's technology. And increasingly, and what I love, over the last 10 years is that technology has given us an extra string in the bow to really drive some of those scale efficiencies, because typically you want to scale up at very low cost, almost no cost. And I could talk about the seed ventures I'm working with at the moment where we're using free software to really drive the marketing. But out of all that, the one thing I would also like to say is that that's great, but you need to understand what your goals and objectives are and prioritize. So there's lots we can do, but it's using all those wonderful tools, your budget and your people, and really understand where the business wants you to make the most impact. So, all those times I've been able to scale with flat budgets, it's really been about prioritization and really being ruthless about that and using data to decide that prioritization.
Yeah, no, very interesting. I'd like to go back actually and talk a bit more about moving away from the legacy side, because I do remember software when you could buy it in a box. And I also remember being quite outraged that no longer do I own this. I have to now pay them a monthly subscription. And it feels really weird now because that's how the same everything is. And they're clever because you just forget you've even got a subscription half the time, do you? And you're paying for things you don't even need. Were you involved in making that decision, or was that was just something that was happening across all of the software space at the time?
Well, no, I came in just after that. And Adobe was a rare example of a software company that made a total, 100% change to that model. There's very few companies that actually done that. you forget that, some of those bigger software businesses still run what we would call on-premise, not box, but on-premise, and what we call perpetual licensing. So you buy some software, a bit like we would in a box, and then it's yours, and that's it. And then you may pay like a maintenance or a sort of support fee. But that was the model of most enterprise software and software generally at the time. And although there are many companies that obviously have software as a service and subscription businesses, some of them are built from the ground up. Salesforce is a great example. And some of them still have kind of on-premise. So the more legacy, you could have called Adobe a legacy company. It was one of the rare legacy companies that moved a multi-billion business and made a bet on it. And that worked because it came from the top down. The CEO was driving this. And, it's a good example of where you do need often that, management leadership directive to make things happen. And he really pushed it through. So it's a credit to him. Coming back to like the change to subscriptions, I love the situation Adobe was in. I mean, obviously customers are very resistant to change, and often quite rightly for good reasons sometimes. And we've always had to face that when we've made, pricing changes or changes to our packaging, or we've retired products and things like that, which always happens in software. But when Adobe made this change, tens of thousands of users lobbied change.org, which is where you object to, bypasses going through your local neighborhood or food regulation. So it's still up there. You can look on change.org, and they lobbied that it was kind of, in the US, that it was kind of unconstitutional and was monopolistic or something like that. And, there's an example of something that you would never expected in software, to have to cope with these kind of social movements complaining about your pricing model. But no, so coming back to it, I guess I was part of the team that then picked that up and drove what we need to do. And it was a really exciting time of change and great learning, like a lot of these things, being part of it.
I think there are lots of companies actually. I mean, one of our clients actually had a infrastructure enterprise product, and they've moved it from that to being a cloud-based subscription one over time. And they serve sort of industrial market. So what if someone's in that scope? I mean, it's really easy to say it, isn't it? We're just moving our product and changing our base. But what sort of we talked about moving from events to being more digital, but is there any sort of breakdown of things that you did at Adobe to really get that customer inside and win over those people that were complaining on websites?
Yeah. Well, what I love about all of my experience and being in marketing is some things never change. So understanding the customer is key to it. And, it varies company to company about the role of marketing in that. I mean, we used to say, the mantra for marketing used to be, it was the voice of the customer, right? Marketing is the voice of the customer. And in a lot of companies, that's just not the case. Marketing is a, function that does some really good stuff and executes really well and is doing, really sort of communication kind of outbound, inbound stuff, but, doesn't really sort of represent the customer. But I think the opportunity today, certainly going forward, is marketing to regain a bit of that, in a lot of companies. So the first thing back then was really understanding those customer concerns, making sure that we communicated them with an open and transparent way, gave them, ways in which they could, voice those concerns. And, and you should be doing this anyway in your marketing, especially in SaaS, where, more sometimes now the customer doesn't necessarily want a direct conversation. They want to be self-service, and they want to use the product and not, and manage it all themselves. So forums, community groups, user groups were key to us at that time, and probably spent, a bit more time in those online forums, opportunities to hear from customers and address their concerns. And it's painful, right? Because it was a big change for all of them. I think that today, if you told a customer, okay, no, we're scrapping our, whatever, $12.99 a month, Netflix style subscription, and you now have to pay us £995 to access a software product, and it will deliver it through the box to your doorstep. They probably complain about that. But, it was a big cultural change, and it was new, and people didn't really understand, and there were security concerns. And so you have to really, think about that. We surrounded them as much as we could with those communications using more digital. So obviously in B2B, LinkedIn's very key to that, but other, social channels as well, and making sure that we're clear in that. making sure we show up in the right publications and sharing our name. But I think the other thing that subscription does is it moves the conversation much more to the customer relationship, because with the box software, you can kind of do drive-by selling. You can sell them a box of software, they stick it on the shelf, and and the industry was had a poor reputation for doing that, and then sort of moving on to the next customer and letting them figure it out. With SaaS and subscription, the renewal is the important part. Is if they don't use the software, get the value out of it, then they're not going to renew. So marketing gets brought more into understanding the customer life cycle, not the life cycle of acquiring a customer, a prospective customer, but the sort of post-sale side of it, and working with the teams, which was new for marketing then. And it's still new for some marketing teams now who are really just asked to focus on lead gen. But in those sorts of businesses like Adobe and VMware, you're being asked to sort of generate leads, create demand, but also retain customers and do customer programs, and again help them understand the value of their software, help them get the most out of the software, working with support teams and account teams. So that was a big shift as well. So we were doing more probably, and at the time, LinkedIn was getting better, more stuff on LinkedIn, more stuff on social. People were engaging a lot more in social back then. I mean, now it's a little harder. And then, more of the sort of customer relationship stuff. And, I, for a while, looked after some global brand campaigns. And historically, Adobe would have done more poster sites and out of home stuff for that advertising, and maybe more skewed towards, TV advertising and other advertising. And our mandate for that was it should be all digitally, through ad networks and through digital advertising versus doing more of the traditional advertising. So that was another thing that we changed, is as brand stuff was more sort of again in those kind of platforms that I mentioned.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think we mentioned this before. I was watching TV, and I see software companies, that are quite the advertising. Oh, it's probably not on the main channels, but it's probably on the sort of satellite channels. But it makes me surprised that first of all, not many people do watch TV adverts now. Anyway, you're very lucky if you get me to watch an advert for more than a few seconds. Why do you think other tech companies are advertising on those TVs?
Yeah, well, everyone is is allowed to do whatever they want. I mean, for me, I only notice those. I mean, maybe this is the point. I only notice those ads because I'm in the industry, and I go, "What? There's a company XYZ. I won't name them." And it's like a B2B tech brand is popped up on, and as you say, it's not going to be the big channels, but it's it's the cable channels. You're scanning through, you're on the History Channel or something else, or true crime, and then suddenly an ad turns up for a CRM product. Like what is this doing here? I mean, first of all, those things are probably I would hope they're fairly cheap now, because it's you're probably buying into like a placement package. Maybe they do work, maybe they don't work. I can't speak for those specific companies, but I think it's how you measure it as well. And again, when I was at Adobe, a big learning for me was the CEO was very, very clear about what he wanted in terms of brand awareness. Is he wanted to see more people Googling Adobe for the key categories that we were in, or coming to the website. So it doesn't count for anything if people aren't then checking us out. And of course, the world in the large companies has been awash with kind of aided and unaided brand awareness surveys, and they have maybe a lead indicator. Maybe it can help you do a competitive comparison, because you can, it's a relative measure against your competitors, but it's not an absolute measure of how your brand awareness is going up or down. And so, I would say I would encourage those companies, but I would expect or hope those companies are looking at, okay, is this increasing people checking us out? And that's the key thing. As well, I have to say, and I'm not going to align this to any specific company I've been in, but there is still a big element of sort of feel-good factor of those things. And sometimes it's important for the employees to see these things out and about. And, as a marketer, you might say, well, I'm not sure it's really, uplifting our awareness or creating more demand, but it sends a signal to our competitors and to our employees that, hey, I saw our ad out there, and That sometimes is a key part of marketing. It's the side that we don't like to talk about because it's not, it's not KPI driven, but there's a feel good factor around that, and there's a reassurance out there to maybe even your customers that, oh, okay, these guys are out there. I see them. I saw your ad. Heathrow Airport's a classic one, right? The kind of big ads at Terminal 5, and it has that sort of positivity impact. But I don't know how much you can measure it. So I would imagine they have other things in the mix. I would hope that's not the only way in which they're building their brand.
Yeah, no, I equally. I wouldn't have bought them based on that. I was already using these products half the time, and that's why I reckon, oh, I use that product. So maybe it is a bit of a brand recognition, but it wouldn't influence my decision to use it or not. Most of the time, I buy because somebody recommends something to me, and then I try it, and they show me how to use it, and then it's easy, and that's how it works. But
marketing, is full of all these kind of attribution and influence kind of measures, and very often we recognize that that's not going to provoke you to buy, but it all helps to your consideration. And I think you're right. I mean, there's lots of stats around, a lot of B2B buyers, have already made their mind up X% down their buyer's journey, whether it's 70% or 80% or 60%. And so they already have their short list, and they're not going to really consider you if you're not in that short list. And, they've done their research, and they phoned a friend, and they've heard from, their team that they've used it elsewhere. And that typically is unfortunately, the thing. But maybe those ads just, kind of help kind of with that. Okay, well, because again, I think the fallacy is that B2B buying is logical. It's not logical. It's emotional, because when you sort of, do a sort of post-sale survey, why did you choose us? Very rarely do they say, well, we evaluated all your features, we scored them out of 10, and then we stack ranked you against your competitors, and you were top. Now, we didn't like your team, and we thought you were completely arrogant, and we really hate working with you, but we just have to go with you. More often than not, it's like, we had good chemistry, we loved the team we worked with, we felt you understood us, we felt we could have a long-term relationship, we felt you invested in our future. And they're quite emotional things, and they're not things that are logical. So, I think we like to play in tests with some of those emotional things as well, like these brand ads, and like some of these, kind of executions that, may not drive direct response, but all help in that. But you've got to be in the short list, a bit like you. I'm already using it. Oh, I feel good about it. Or it's in my short list of 3. Oh, that's good to see. It's good to know that they're out there kind of, alive and kicking.
I think we're talking about that mix, that magic mix of innovation and creativity versus data.
Yeah.
And have you got any other examples of where you've had that's really come to play, and it's maybe taught you a lesson?
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm very aware that, when a marketer talks about use data to drive decisions, suddenly, you're sort of, you're on this, death spiral of optimization, and that's not the thing. You still need some creative things. So first of all, what I've tried to do, with the teams I've led, is kind of have a 70-20-10 model. 70% you're investing in that sort of side, right? Which are things that you're optimizing, understanding, realigning your budgets, shutting down certain channels. 20% then should be trying things where you're sort of evaluating, whether they're, they could be impactful. I don't know. Maybe TikTok is the answer for your, B2B HR system. I don't know. Maybe it probably isn't, but why not? And then 10% is just crazy experiments. And it's important for the team as well to have that kind of model. And whether it's 70-20-10, or people might be horrified, maybe it's 95-5, right? So, some people might say, I can't afford to spend 30% of my stuff on trialing and experimenting. But yeah, I mean, I've kind of made hard pivots, cancelled event series. This was 2019, and said, let's just do one big virtual event in 3 different languages. At the time, that was technically very challenging, but we got more impact, we got more reach. We used to do a roadshow of 10 events and maybe get a couple hundred in each event across Europe. We did an online virtual event, like in a virtual world, and we did it simultaneously in English, French, and German. So we had different studios in different countries. And we had 28,000 attendees, and the pipeline numbers were like 3x what we would have got out of a physical event, and that was just a shot in the dark. now we would probably embrace those sorts of things more than we would then. That was kind of pre-pandemic when everyone, still wanted to go to physical events. And you might say, well, people are going back to that now. When I was at VMware, we like to do like an innovation competition where we put aside some budget to fund teams' ideas to reach a business objective, but just, blue sky, just completely come up with a crazy idea. The winning team came up with a racing game where they had a whole sort of competition where you won swag. The racing game, it was hitting the marks on terms of getting across some key messages about our product. So sounds a bit dry, but it was really fun, I can assure you. And that really engaged. And then we used that as for example, as an execution when we did some of our customer conferences. So we had a racing car, and then we had other teams who had some ideas who didn't win, but they still went and executed them and tried them out. So one was taking an electric VW camper around to key customers with a coffee stall, and that was more about getting internal adoption of our products, and that worked really well. So it really sort of sparks ideas, and we try things that we wouldn't have done if we were just using data to optimize our marketing channels.
That competition, was it an internal competition
yes,
then? Yes.
Yes.
So okay, internal competition, everyone to get some ideas.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. I've done customer competitions as well. So I once did a competition with Vodafone where we were trying to roll out our software, and got teams in Vodafone to come up with creative ideas, and had a similar sort of internal competition to customer. And then I've also done customer hackathons, right, which are very popular in more technical products. I did one when I was at Expedia, where it was like a 48-hour hackathon over the weekend. All these developers came together, we briefed them, and then they came on a Saturday morning and they came back on a Sunday evening with their kind of proofs of concept. And, they're on site in a hotel for 48 hours, which is a scary thought for some people. But yeah, developers love that sort of thing. And, that was getting customers and partners to come up with some ideas. And then the commitment on that one was, it was really sort of product ideas that we would put that into the product roadmap. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. For developers, it's really hard to engage with them, isn't it?
Yeah,
Developers are a really hard audience to get hold of.
Well,
so...
they don't like being sold or marketed to, which makes the life of a marketer very hard. So.
Yeah, and nearly every marketing person is trying to sell to a developer or someone in the tech team. So it's a clever way to get to them. No, I love that idea. So we're coming close to time. I'm really keen to talk to you about your transition from being in much more of a corporate world to your fractional work, and also to maybe, first of all, what inspired you to do the move?
Yeah,
what are you doing?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm at a point in my career where I've been lucky enough to do, many different things in big and small companies. And I love the practice of marketing. I think it's a great time to be a marketer. And one of the things that I love about marketing now is that you can try things out very cheaply, and actually you don't need the big budgets. And you need the big budgets where probably you have a big geographic reach and a very complex business, but you don't need the big budgets to do some of the fundamentals. And what I love is that marketing is a very hands-on practice. So I've always been connected to the technology, trying AI, trying automation tools, engaging with social media myself personally, and bringing that into the business. And that's what I encourage the teams to do, is bringing those things in. So I guess the kind of world is shrinking in terms of what only big companies can do and what small companies can do. So the opportunity as a marketer from a big business to work in startups is a lot easier, because I think to be a good marketer, a leader in a big business, you have to be very connected to the practice of it. So I can bring that to a small business. And then, I guess, like a lot of people, very aware of kind of wellness, health, general health, fitness, but also, mental health and impact on the planet. At VMware, we did a lot of work around how we can optimize, data centers and systems to be greener, effectively, and monitor that. So I brought that really to some of these seed ventures. I'm working with a biodiversity rewilding business, which has an interesting digital angle. So they want to build their subscriber base by digital, techniques. And it's a consumer-facing business. But a lot of what you need to do in the consumer world is very similar to what we do in the B2B world. So that's what I love as well. The lines are blurring. So it kind of ticks a lot of boxes. I can bring that experience to a smaller business and help them with something that, I feel more passionate about after years of doing, not to say that, B2B technology doesn't help but help in a different way with climate change and other things. And so working directly with them on their sort of digital, growth strategy, and also investing some other businesses which align to those kind of areas.
And what would you say the trigger is for a smaller scale up business to hire a fractional?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I guess, I would say it depends what you want to do with that resource, right? What I would say in a scale up true startup is, the founder really needs to be pretty hands-on with the business, and the founder should be setting the tone in those early stages because they can't afford not to. So firstly, I think it's different to coming in to maybe a larger business where you need sort of functional excellence and the business has scaled up a bit where you need people to take various sections. In a true, sort of seed stage startup, the role of the marketer, I think, is yes, to bring perspective and ideas and thoughts, but really to execute on what the CEO needs to do. I wouldn't say it's like an operational role and you have the opportunity to have the discussion, but I think you need to get a little bit out of the way of the CEO because, he has to or she has to be, driving that business. So I think in the early stage, you can help with, positioning, messaging, kind of strategy, but, that's for nothing if you're not in the execution. So, I'm doing a lot of helping with all of the operational stuff as well, which which is great. I think it's important that marketers are involved in that. And then I think as you progress, the sort of type of marketer you need may change. And, I'm able to sort of like a dolphin, kind of come out on the surface, go down and go. And I've always been like that. Depends what you want the marketer to be involved in realistically.
Yeah, it's interesting you're being hands-on actually, because a lot of my other fractional CMOs, they would just do the strategy and then they say they're too expensive to do the tactical stuff, so they may bring in a more junior person to do that.
Yeah, I think it's as well. It's the it's the commercial engagement, right? If you're a fractional CMO on a day rate and that's your business, that's different to the moment I'm looking to sort of almost invest in these businesses and work with them. So I understand that, and Karen, that the sort of fractional term is quite a broad church.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to ask you, because there are so many people that there's so many different like blends of fractional and what fractional means, and it's become a bit of a buzzword recently.
Yeah, I know.
Exactly. And there's some people who are doing fractional, or what I would define as fractional, which is basically taking the role of a senior leader on a part-time basis and working for a variety of different companies. Some people have been doing that for years, but it wouldn't have been called fractional CMO. It would have been called something else. Now there's some people who are actually just part-time marketing managers who are calling themselves fractional CMOs. So, there's different flavors, but hey, I think long as it doesn't, I'm not one to care about job titles or labels. Ultimately, it's about what the person brings to the business.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, I'm not necessarily looking to sort of build that business. You know what I mean? I'm just getting involved in interesting companies, and it's more like that. But yeah, it's one of those terms of the year, isn't it? Phrases of the year.
Yes, fractional absolutely. CMO. Fractional CMO, it really is. No, it's lovely because I can genuinely see, and I know from talking to you before, that the companies you're working at, you're not just doing it, you're doing it because you care about those businesses, you want them to succeed, and you've got to this point where it's really important that you see the outcome for those businesses.
Exactly.
And you're coming from a different place to perhaps you were if you're working for a corporate and you're
I mean, I think I'm more I'm absolutely in the sort of in the business versus what you described, producing some strategy, dropping in over and then moving on to another one. I'm more invested in the businesses, so I'll find a phrase that sums it up somehow.
No, great stuff. No, well, we've covered so much, and the time has gone so quickly, and I feel like I've learnt so much. Is there anything that you wanted to mention today that I haven't already asked you?
No, not particularly. I mean, if I were to provide some advice on terms of what I've learned and what I think makes a great marketing leader, I think it's a blend of being data driven, but not forgetting about using creativity to create that spark, and then thirdly, it's about aligning to the business and making sure you're always commercially focused in whatever you do and whatever you're asked to do. So I think from our great conversation. I think those are the three themes that I would talk about. And I'm just disappointed in 2024, Karen, we haven't talked about AI, but that's another podcast.
I know. Well, I think we need to come back and have the conversation. I was going to talk to you a little bit more about AI and Marketo, you were the early adopter of Marketo, but I decided I thought it was more interesting to focus on the other bits, so we didn't.
Yeah, no problem. Maybe some other time.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you so much. I've really enjoyed today's session with John. It's been great learning his valuable insights and experiences. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Spotlight in Marketing. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and rate and review the podcast. And don't forget to share it with your colleagues, friends, and community. But until next time, keep shining the spotlight on the power of marketing in driving business growth.